Hey guys, in today's video I am comparing two lenses. This is the Sony 50mm f1.8 versus the Zeiss 55mm f1.8. So let's take a look at both of these lenses up close before we jump into the side-by-side comparison. Alright, so here are the lenses side by side. As you can see, the Zeiss on the left is a little bit longer, but honestly they are quite comparable when you consider that they use the exact same filter size, so 49mm filter thread on each one. So the lens caps are interchangeable. Around the back you can see that there is a difference. There is the cutout for the APS-C size sensor, and then the Zeiss 55 is a full frame lens, so the cutout is bigger. Both lenses have autofocus electronic connections. Both lenses have nice and large focus rings. The one on the Zeiss is noticeably smoother, but both are decent. All right, so now let's take a look at some side-by-side photos from both of these lenses. Now, for these examples, I used a tripod. I used the exact same camera. It's a Sony a6500. Manual settings for all of the shots except for one in the comparison. I did a 2-second shutter delay, and these are 3x2 JPEGs. So I wanted to see just straight out of the camera with corrections from the camera body itself what these two lenses will produce as far as shots. So let's jump into it. So to keep things simple, I'm going to keep all of the Zeiss lens images on the left and all of the Sony 50mm images on the right. From the very beginning, you can probably tell there's a little bit of a difference in how each one of these shots is exposed. Let me show you kind of one and then the other. So here is the Zeiss image, and here is the Sony 50. Zeiss and the Sony 50. Sony 50 looks a little bit overexposed. Right away what you can see is the background is a little bit more creamy with the Zeiss lens. And that's a combination of a couple of things. Obviously, you're looking at a 55mm focal length versus a 50mm focal length. That does make a difference, but I think it's more to do with just the way that the Zeiss lens is constructed and the coatings, because that's pretty significant difference between the background blur on each image. So let's take a look at the center and see there's much of a difference in sharpness here. I used eye autofocus on this image. You can see that the skin tones look a little better on the Zeiss. And as far as sharpness and clarity, I think that the Zeiss is a little bit better than that Sony 50. But the Sony 50 is not a soft lens at all. I think that all of the detail is definitely still there. Overall, I'd have to say that the Zeiss image is a little bit more pleasing just because it seems to be exposed properly and because the background is a little bit just more smooth. You can see that here. Let's move on to the next one. So here is the next shot, another portrait. These are portrait lenses after all. Both of these done at f2.8, so stop down a little bit. And eye autofocus on this one as well. So let's see which one did it better. Both are tack sharp. There's not much of a difference here. You can see a little more detail in the eyebrows, I guess, with the Zeiss, but both eyes are nicely focused. A little more hair detail here. But both shots honestly look great. And again, you can see the background. Look at the bokeh balls here versus the 50mm bokeh balls. Again, this is f2.8 on both lenses, but significantly larger on the Zeiss, so that does make a difference. Color fringing here, but same thing on the Sony 50. Both lenses doing exceptionally well here. I just say that the background is slightly creamier on the Zeiss, otherwise sharpness is about the same on both. So this next shot is more of a cityscape. This one is done at f8 on both lenses. So I wanted to just see if either one of these lenses was particularly sharper at f8, and it doesn't look like it. Colors are a little bit more vibrant on the Zeiss, you can see in the crane, but the Sony 50 is nice and sharp. There's really nothing distinguishing these two here. Even down to the corners, let's see.
Yeah, the 50 looks great. Still nice and tack sharp into the corners. Let's take a look at this side. Same story. Both lenses are sharp. You can still read all of these signs over here. I'd say at f8 for landscape work, both lenses perform similarly. Here's another one, again at f8. This one is just of a street here. I wanted to see if I could zoom into this stop sign way up in the corner and see which one was sharper. Zeiss looks a little more clear to me, and you can tell with these branches in this tree, it's a little sharper here, not by a whole lot, but it is ever so slightly noticeable. I'm going to say it's maybe 5% sharper, if that. But otherwise, again, similar story. Not much of a difference here. In the corners, 50 is nice and sharp. 55 Zeiss is also nice and sharp. This side, both images are nice and sharp. Like I said, there's not much to differentiate either one of these lenses at f8. This next shot is another portrait of my wife, this time at f2. ISO is cranked to 640 on the 55 and 500 on the 50. You'll notice that the shutter speed is a little bit different because I wanted to see how these lenses would shoot in kind of an auto setting on the camera. So if you have kind of semi-low light, this is what you'd get with the 55, and here's what you get with the 50. So let's zoom in here. All right, it looks like my wife has something in her eye, but sharpness is about the same on both. If I had to give a winner, I think the Zeiss is slightly better, not by a whole lot, but just a little bit more detail in the hair as well. But the 50 is just so close that it's really hard to fault it. This is not like a night and day difference as it is with many comparisons. Now the background bokeh looks relatively close here, but it is ever so slightly more smooth on the Zeiss. Let's take a look at these little flowers and you'll see. Bokeh balls are a little smaller, whereas they're just nice and creamy with the Zeiss. So if you are a fan of background blur, the Zeiss is your lens of choice.
So that is it for the side-by-side comparison, and I think that this is the first comparison that a Zeiss lens has ever performed up to my expectations. I was not impressed with the 16-70 Zeiss, and when I took the Zeiss 24 and compared it to the Sigma 30, the Sigma was clearly sharper and better in almost every regard, including price. This Zeiss 55 is definitely better than the Sony 50. Now let me rephrase that. If both of these lenses were the exact same price, now let's say for example each one of these lenses cost $300, I would absolutely recommend that everyone pick the Zeiss over the Sony 50. But that is not reality. The Sony 50mm is a $250 lens, brand new. Now when you consider that this lens is $250 and it performs very, very close, at least in sharpness, to a $1,000 Zeiss, it's going to be hard to justify the price of the Zeiss lens for most folks, especially when you factor in that this lens also has optical stabilization built in, that steady shot. So if you have an A6000 and A6300 that does not have in-body stabilization, this lens is going to perform a little bit better for video than something that is not optically stabilized like the Zeiss lens. And let me reiterate once again that this side-by-side comparison was very, very close, probably the closest that I've ever done on this channel. So that says a lot about the $250 lens that I'm holding right here. I think for most people, if you're starting out with an A6000 and you're really just trying to get into photography, this Sony 50mm lens is going to be perfectly adequate, more than adequate for most people. It's going to give you excellent, very sharp images, very great looking portraits at a budget price point. So definitely check this out if you're in the market for a portrait lens. If you get paid for portrait work, the Zeiss is the lens to buy. Yes, it's $1,000. And for that $1,000, again, what you're getting is a slightly creamier bokeh, nicer bokeh balls. slightly sharper image as far as your subject is concerned, better skin tones, and more vibrant colors. Again, for most people, those 4 things are probably not going to justify the quadruple price point of this Zeiss lens. They'll be perfectly happy with the Sony 50. But for the professionals, again, that are looking for the absolute best, this is the one to get. I am now very curious as to how well this Zeiss will compare to the newly announced Sigma 56mm f1.4, which should be coming out shortly. Can't wait for that. So stay tuned for that video. Let me know what you guys thought of the side-by-side comparison of these 2 lenses. Let me know what your experience has been with these 2. As always, I'll post links down below. If you're on a budget and you're looking for a great portrait lens, check out this Sony 50, again, about $250. If you want the absolute best, swing for the Zeiss. It's a $1,000 lens, but in my eyes, it's one of the few Zeiss lenses that is in fact worth its price tag if you are a professional. So thank you guys for watching. Thanks for all of your likes, comments, and support. Stay tuned for more, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.